as well as it sort of gets in conflict with my teaching schedule.
Yeah, must be hard managing all of these things at once.
Well, it is an interesting thing, but this is perfect.
It is perfect. It's an alternative, I believe, and it's a compromise. So I think we'll be sticking to virtually meeting one another until a greater invention takes place, I guess.
Well, the metaverse is out there, and we are doing some virtual reality testing right now for doing classwork. And it's quite impressive what we can do with virtual reality.
Exactly, yes. And Omar has told us so much about you. I'm very glad we were finally able to arrange a date, with everyone being busy with their daily lives. So I'm glad we were able to reach a date where it's suitable for the both of us.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and the topic we're going to talk about is going to address some of the issues that perhaps you were struggling with your technology that supply chain professionals are struggling with today.
Yes, that would be great. I think we are ready to start. So I are you a- are you able to share the screen?
I see a screen share, and let me try sharing the screen here. Let me move this and see if I can get
Okay,
my. Hold on, hold on.
take your
Let me
time.
get my. I need to put the slides on the right screen here. Otherwise, it won't share for me. Let's see. Let me share this and let me do that. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. Let me maximize. Come on. Oops. That's not what I wanted. Windows doesn't do everything that I want it to do. So let me do it a different way. And get rid of my slide over here. You are not seeing that right now. So can you see my slides here on the screen?
Yes,
Yes, perfectly clear.
Okay. Well, let me start. First of all, let me thank all of you who are online for coming this evening and listening to this discussion on supply chain management, what is ahead. What I want to do, and I'm going to set a context here, is discuss some of the global trends that we are seeing, just in general, the macro trends, and then move to the technology trends that are merging in with those macro trends to create huge challenges for the supply chain professionals of the future. And that's you. What do you have to do? What do you have to think about when you're looking at technology? And what are the technologies you really should be aware of? And what are the technologies that are simply being hyped today because someone wants to sell some ideas and thoughts? So hopefully that will be an interesting little presentation. And I'm looking forward to your thoughts at what you think is really going to happen, because this is your generation that's going to have to deal with all of these upcoming. So let me go to my first slide here that discusses the the primary challenges that we are seeing around the world today. We start off with globalization. Now, globalization for the last 30 years has been very beneficial for the economies of the world, but it's also been somewhat of a mixed blessing. Certain economies, certainly China, has done very well. And the Western economies, the traditional Western economies, such as Western Europe or the United States, have also benefited from this from lower costs. But other economies in the emerging world have basically not seen much benefit. And focus has been primarily on this true East-West movement of goods and globalization has really had an impact on the world, and it's made us, all of us in the supply chain, very much more aware of international trade and the movement of goods. Another global trend has been the demographic shift in the world. The Western and more advanced, what I would call capitalist societies, are becoming much and more like me, very old, getting older all the time. China as well is getting older because of Mao Zedong's one-child strategy. So we just recently saw of China as the most populous country in the world. And that's going to continue. China has a very aging population. As the Japanese, the German population, Germany, where I am right now, has an aging population. Italy, Spain, France. The Western world is getting older, and the younger world is your world. The emerging North African countries, the emerging Southeast Asian countries, as well as India and some of the South American countries, are the countries that have the young population. And while that has some interesting questions, the big thing in the world of commerce is that it's the who are acquiring goods that cause economies to grow. And it is the older populated goods who cause economies to slow down. So we're going to see in these younger economies the future of growth. We're also seeing another trend, a global trend of urbanization. Mega cities are growing. Cairo, classic example of a mega city, and they have huge issues associated with urban logistics, congestion, traffic, and the problem with society, because when people move to the city, they lose touch with their small town ancestry, if you will, and they become detached. And that creates a lack of commitment to the community, that creates what's called anami, which is an inability to feel comfortable in that urban environment. And yet, well over half the world lives in an urban environment, and that's simply going to increase over the next 20 years. So again, another change going on around the world. We also have, as we all know, global warming. This winter is one of the warmest winters in Germany in its recorded history. To a certain extent, that's beneficial since Germany, as well as most of Europe, has been cut off from its recent historical source of heating fuel, which is natural gas, from the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But the world itself is getting warmer, and that has impact for everyone, particularly supply chain professionals with extended supply chains, because weather patterns are changing due to the warmth, and we are seeing more violent storms, more precipitation in the storms because warmer air holds more water, and therefore more damage when monsoons and hurricanes arrive along different pathways, because again, the jet streams are moving from their traditional lanes. So we're seeing problems there. We also have problems with pollution. We tend to get overwhelmed with global warming and forget about the other environmental impacts that we have. But the world of fast fashion, the world of plastics, the world of just waste in general is increasing, and that means that we are having a larger and larger impact on our environment beyond simple global warming. Huge amounts of plastic in the ocean. If we look at the fast fashion industry, where people are just buying and then throwing away clothing, if you go down to the Patagonia area of Argentina and Chile, you tend to think of Patagonia as these beautiful mountains, but it also has dry valleys that are literally completely covered with thrown away fabric goods. Because for some reason, the Chilean and Argentinian governments have imported those goods with the expectation that perhaps something was usable, and the unusable components are just thrown out into this area where we have huge amounts now of wastage. And beyond that, we're seeing a rising tension around the world in geopolitical issues. We are seeing China and the United States becoming cold warriors, Russia and Europe, and again, the United States coming into tension. We're seeing tensions in the Middle East, tensions in Africa. So the world is becoming more fragile from a geopolitical perspective as well. And as supply chain professionals who are sourcing around the world, that has a major impact on the risks associated with where you are purchasing goods, where your suppliers are sitting, and whether or not there may be a disruption due to some sort of geopolitical issue. And something to worry about. So these are big issues affecting all of us right at the moment. And if we move ourselves beyond simply the major geopolitical issues and take a look at really what that means for you as professionals, but also as supply chain professionals in general, we're challenging the taken for granted issues that we have had, or taken for granted concepts that we have had for the last 30 years. You know, in the last 30 years, supply chains have been located where labor arbitrage gave us the cheapest labor. Well, right now, we're starting to find out that maybe there's risks associated with that. Geopolitical risks, extended supply chain risks that are weather-related now, or other types of relationship issues. So is it always a wise decision to locate your supplier base where you can get the cheapest labor? Are we too big to fail? Big organizations, certainly during the first part of the 2000s, experienced the financial crisis, and certain organizations were deemed to be. But is that really true anymore? Or are organizations prone to failure and simply because governments can no longer support bailing out these organizations? There's also the concept in the West that we could always find workers, but that's turning out to be incorrect. In the supply chain, you can't find people who will want to drive long distances in trucks. Finding warehouse personnel is becoming more difficult. Essentially, finding laborers, what traditionally was an entry-level operation in supply chain, is becoming more and more difficult. We're seeing trade barriers again being erected after many years of having them come down. We're seeing oil becoming a scarcer commodity and one that people are more and more trying to move away from as we look to alternative energy sources. And we also see people thinking that maybe we can't grow our way anymore out of the problems that we have. In other words, maybe we have to contract as opposed to continue to grow and grow or think we can grow and grow in a barrierless world, because today barriers are being built up again. So these are the challenges that these global trends are placing upon managers. But that's only one side of the squashing duality that's out there. The other side is the uncertainty that's being caused by technological change. Now, how many of you have used Chat GPT? Come on, raise your hands. Well, generative AI is only one example of what I would claim to be surprising technology that should not be surprising. For those of us who work in the world of research, generative AI has been, a fundamental research area that is quite exciting and that we have seen advance very rapidly in the last decade due to better computing power and better algorithms. Which have led to abilities to really process the massive amounts of data that have to be processed in the learning cycle of these generative AI algorithms. And so it's not surprising to see the Chat GPTs of the world come out. And we're going to see even smarter technologies, if you want to call them smart, in the relatively near term, being released into the marketplace. So I don't think we have seen the last of the surprises, because we are in a world of increasing computing power. If we take a look at all of the advances that have occurred in the last 10 years in both just basic silicon development, the processing CPUs, if you will, but also all of the peripheral devices that have become smarter and smarter that allow us, such as graphical processing units, to do real, what I would call heavy-duty calculations, because a GPU does what's called vector graphic calculations, and vectors are exactly what the Chat GPT uses to go and calculate against all of the various words or languages or pictures that it is using in its learning process. So this concept of using a GPU rather than a CPU for these types of calculations has really accelerated this ability to move forward. And we're going to see that continue with quantum computing, which allows us even orders of magnitude improvement in computing power. So in the next 10 years, we're going to probably see some really astounding generative AI advances. So keep that in mind. We're also seeing advances in communications technologies. 5G coming out recently, 6G coming out in the next couple of years. So bandwidth is no longer being constrained. Now, what's constraining all of this is the capital investment that has to go into all of the upgrades for the mobile technologies. But once all of that is out there, we're going to get away from having to be tethered to anything. We're already seeing that in some of the most recently released mobile phones that are attaching to various satellite internet services. So your phone can connect up anywhere in the world to a Starlink satellite. These are things that truly will make us completely independent of wired anything. And that's pretty exciting. For a supply chain professional today, if you want to track your goods, whether it's in an airplane or on the ocean, you have to rely on the carrier to provide you with a connection through their proprietary link to the aircraft or to the vessel. In the future, you won't need that. In the future, you can instrument your shipment and it can broadcast to you on your own channel, and you won't have to worry about any of this connecting and getting authorization whenever something goes into somebody else's ship or aircraft. So that's going to be pretty interesting for supply chain professionals and the track and trace world. Development of cloud-based computing is another major advance. During the late 1990s, I worked in Silicon Valley, and I was involved in 3 different startups. And each one of those startups was funded in what's called the A round of funding. At that time, an A round was 3 million US dollars. Today, it's 10 million. I wish I could have gotten 10 million back then. But back then, we didn't have cloud computing. So out of the $3 million, almost 1/3 of it always had to go to hardware. So that left us 2 million to pay payrolls, but more importantly, it left us 2 million to market. And when you're starting up a company, marketing is the biggest expense that you have from a non-hardware perspective, at least at that time. And that meant that of the last 2 million that was left, 1 million went to hardware, 1 million went to marketing, giving us 1 million left to pay salaries and do the development work. And that was very, very constraining. And this happened in all 3 of the companies that I participated in the starting up. Today, you can get twice the computing capability that we had for $1 million back then for less than $100,000 today. And that just frees up huge amounts of ability to do the real development. Things have improved. That's very good with cloud computing. Miniature, and it also, by the way, allows you to build this world of not connected anywhere, but always connected everywhere, which is nice. Miniaturization has helped with sensors. I mean, we talk about the IoT revolution. Well, that's a combination of communication, miniaturization of computing technology and sensor technology, and increasing power of computers. Those three things allow us to have IoT. So the IoT revolution is simply an outcome of three very basic technological improvements and advances that are continuing in other areas as well. Improved algorithms, I mentioned the ChatGPT, generative AI improvement in algorithms, but across the board, we've developed better algorithms for analyzing the huge amounts of data we have today. More insights and learn better from the data that they have. So that's always advancing as well. These are areas that I do a lot of work. We're seeing huge advances in this. And then finally, 3D printing. Additive manufacturing is now coming of age. We can print just about anything. We're getting more and more sophisticated. And we are also seeing 3D printing speeds increase remarkably. So we no longer machine shops to make the devices or items that we want or components. We can do this all in 3D printing. And there are huge 3D printing operations now being developed to go and eliminate this job shop world that we've seen in the past. So all of these things are coming to bear on management today, and they are squashed between these two evolving technology and huge market trends. So they are asking themselves, what should we do? What should our business models be for the future? Do we really have a distributed supply chain, or should we bring everything back nearshore everything? How do we change so that the customers who are demanding faster and more unique items can be served better? How can we address all of these increasing risks that we see out there in the market? That globalization, geopolitics, the changing environment, etc., are causing for us. How can we operate when no one wants to do the work that is needed to make the products or to move the products that we make? So big challenge there, finding people, finding talent so that we can go and actually do the work that we need to do. And how can we keep our workforce safe when we have pandemics, geopolitical risks, environmental weather risks, all of the things that today we are seeing more and more of come together to cause damage to our facilities and to harm to our people. So we have to worry about all of these different things, which are quite challenging for the supply chain professionals of the future. We recently conducted with SAP a study of what technologies are being used today and what technologies are not being used today in industry. We wanted to know what, would be the wave of the future for all of these technologies that people are talking about. And while, people really didn't know much about the future, they could tell us about what they were doing today. And one of the key points that they brought out is this little, what I call quote from an FMCG supply chain director, a fast-moving consumers goods supply director. And he said, we have not had any success playing with technologies like blockchain. Where we have had real adoption is when there has been a critical business issue that needed a solution. Here we have seen artificial intelligence and data analytics really providing us with value. And that is characteristic of what we found in this study, which is that businesses today, while interested in technology and not unaware of technology, are still businesses. They still are looking at making profits. And so when they don't see a return on investment, they don't invest in the technology. Now, one can say maybe that's very short-sighted, but with all of the pressures on business people today, that's probably not an unimaginable response. In fact, it's what I would call a pragmatic response to the situations they find themselves in. When we took a look at the technologies on the emerging landscape at the university, we determined that the highest potential were in these technologies shown on this slide: advanced analytics, additive manufacturing, the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, robotic automation, virtual and augmented reality, autonomous vehicles, blockchain and smart contracts, and digital twins. And I'll briefly cover those, and then I'll close out this discussion so that we can have a Q&A at the end. So if I take a look at additive or advanced analytics, I should say, this is pretty straightforward. We've been talking about data analytics for the last 20 years, and it is really bearing fruit for the industries that have started to look at the data that they have traditionally collected in their operational systems, but by enhancing that with external data sources, they are really seeing value in what they can do. You can do a lot of determination, predicting of various future scenarios, eliminating customer churn, all sorts of things that you can do through analyzing your data and trying to create preventive losses and anticipate future potential losses. So these are things that advanced analytics is helping, and we think that it's just going to increase. So any of you who are numbers people and really like analytics, you have a great future because this is not going to go away. Beyond advanced analytics, additive manufacturing is really moving forward. We're starting to see what I call 5-axis printing, multiple metal printing, different composite printing mechanisms, large scale printing. I show here a house being printed. In fact, the expectation is that when we go to Mars, this is exactly how they are going to build living quarters on Mars. So they have experimented with figuring out how to bring the type of soil that Mars has together with adhesives that would be shipped from the Earth and go and build houses for the people who would live up there. But more close to us, this is the type of operation that is used in the Netherlands to create housing for the many people who have been displaced from various war zones around the Mediterranean and in Eastern Europe. So this is something that is not science fiction. It is something currently being used. And Airbus uses it for pieces on aircraft. We know that the automobile companies use additive manufacturing for pieces in their vehicles. So it's not something that is out there in science fiction land. And it is improving in every year. So we're going to see continued use in this space. The Internet of Things is also going great guns. The biggest problem we have with IoT is simply connection and battery life. The two items that are problematic with your mobile telephone. And if you think of your mobile telephone as an IoT device, it is an IoT device. But if you were to think that you left your mobile telephone out in the wild somewhere to collect data, after a point in time, it would not be able to transmit because the battery would die. And somebody would have to go out there and recharge it or change the battery. And if there was no cellular connection that it could connect to, you'd also have a problem. And these are the two problems with IoT, and that is the ubiquitous connection problem. So very difficult to always be connected everywhere in the world, particularly where you want your IoT device to be telling you something, because if it's in a standard controlled area, then you don't really care, but it's when it's out in that remote area that you want to know what's going on. And the battery life. And these are two things that people are struggling with today with IoT, but we'll see those improve in the future. In the interim, we're seeing everything instrumented. The cameras that are on traffic signals, the cameras, security cameras that are on all the buildings around town, the infrastructure sensors that are being placed in the roadways, all sorts of different things. And if you have a smartwatch, all it is an IoT device that's monitoring your health and well-being. So lots of different things. So if everything gets sensorized, then as a supply chain professional, you might be able to manage all of the flow of goods and packages as if they were packets on the internet, much as a physical internet might operate. So you might think about that. That's an area that I also do research in. How do we perhaps take what we've learned from the digital internet and use it to manage all of these physical assets that have sensors on them? So another area of interesting future research. AI. What can I say about AI? The first thing I will say about artificial intelligence is if it's intelligent, then it's not artificial. So if we make something that can think like us, that actually has some sort of reasoning, natural reasoning capability, then is it artificial or is it simply intelligent? A big philosophical question. But irrespective of that, we are a bit away from getting to that point. But I'll tell you, and I'll be very honest about this, it is only a matter of time, because people are working on continually improving this capability, new algorithms, new capabilities, new approaches. And it's not going to be 100 years from now, but somewhere in the next 20 to 25 years, we probably will have created what today is called artificial intelligence. In the interim, we're going to have more chat GPTs and things like that that help us do traditional tasks. Have a problem a bit with replacing, though, the work that some people do. So some people may find that, like in all technological revolutions, their jobs are put at risk. But that only emphasizes more and more what you, all of you, are doing, and that is increasing your knowledge and using the gray matter up here, because that's really what distinguishes us from machines. And we need to keep that in mind. It's our minds, not our physiques, that distinguish us from a machine, and we need to keep the minds working. So AI, robotic automation, and this is the classic why I say it's not our muscle, it's our brain, because robots certainly are stronger than we are. And robotic automation is becoming more and more important in our business, the business of supply chain and logistics, because we can't find workers. And so to replace the people who traditionally worked in our warehouses or worked in our factories moving things, we now use machines. And that's probably not a bad thing, because if you look at the health and safety of somebody who has to pick up a lot of weight every day and move it around, they have more accidents and more problems physically. So using a machine to augment or to replace all of that activity is a smart thing to do. So we are seeing lots and lots of robotic automation around the world, and particularly in the West, where people are getting older. And it's harder and harder to find people who will work in these facilities and put up with all of the problems that occur. Virtual and augmented reality. This is going. Today we are using it to do very simple tasks of supporting our pick and place in are in our warehouses, or providing us guidance to do maintenance. But I can tell you, in using it in training and in education and in other aspects, it's only a short step to move from this two-dimensional flat screen that sits in front of us here to a headset where I could see all of you as if you were standing around me. And that would be a much, much better experience for all of us. And that's not that far away. So this is going to be another game changer in how things are done. And if we really want to get crazy about this, we can start thinking about Arnold Schwarzenegger in the movie Total Recall, where all you have to do is put this little headset on and you can be anywhere in the world on vacation. And that is not that far away either. So the idea of living in a mask, my nephew does this right now, and I tell him to go outside, but he won't do it. He's got to live in this mask. So virtual reality, another major area in the future of technology. Then we have our issue of blockchain and distributed ledgers. Now, blockchain, how many of you are familiar with blockchain? Come on, raise your hand. All right. Any of you using something like Bitcoin or one of the cryptocurrencies? Come on, raise your hand if you are. Well, I'm not a cryptocurrency guy. I think right now it's a little bit too much black magic going on. In other words, too much wild, wild west. But blockchain is an interesting thing. It's not a cryptocurrency. Blockchain is simply a very simple flat file that is peer-to-peer database, actually, that has a very, very sophisticated security process attached to it. And blockchain by itself doesn't do anything except store stuff, just like a database. So it's not very exciting if you just think of blockchain. However, if you build code on top of blockchain, what's called smart contracts, which basically is software that responds to events, executes some action based upon the event, and then writes that event and action to the blockchain so it's immutable and non-repudiatable, then you've got something. Because this is really what happens when you do a financial transaction on top of on top of blockchain. And if we're looking at what happens when we do movement of freight, this would be the great way to figure out, did something occur? Should I pay that individual for performing something? And this is a value proposition for blockchain in the supply chain. So we think that this is going to actually do some very good things in the future. And once we get beyond blockchain, we come to digital twins. Is this a concept that you are familiar with? Well, what a digital twin is, it started out as an engineering design of a physical item. So if you had an engine, you could design the engine and then simulate the engine using data that you fed in, and it would be a twin of the actual physical engine. Today, because of computing power being more and more powerful, people are actually making twins, simulations of entire cities, so that we can actually model making changes in the city and see what that would mean before on a computer model before we ever make the change in the city. We're using it as well to model logistics operations. So what happens if something breaks in your supply chain, or if something is delayed? How does that impact downstream operations? How can you perhaps recover from that by doing something else upstream quickly if you note that that has happened? How do you manage urban logistics so that you don't get into congestion, so you don't have problems in the city? These are areas that we are doing modeling with the digital twins, and we're seeing some very, very interesting outcomes. That is my last technology. So I want to wrap this up so that we can talk a little bit about your thoughts. I will send Omar this entire slide deck. There are many more slides in here than what I showed. Okay, so if he can post it for you, you can take a look at all of the content in it and get a little more depth in each one of the areas. But I wanted to only go through this quickly, and it's already over my time limit, so I appreciate you standing around, hanging around. But let me emphasize at the very end that whatever technology materializes in this digital future, which will materialize, there's going to be a pragmatic approach that is taken to implementing it, because businesses are businesses, and we need to keep that in mind. But at the same time, we have these huge pressures pushing on us, making that world that we're going to move into much, much more difficult to operate in than the world of the last 30 years. So with that and the challenge that goes with it, I'm going to close and open up for questions. Thank you. And I'll stop sharing so we can have a little bit better, if you will, face-to-face, hopefully. Can you see me now?
presentation, and thank you so much for your time. We also appreciate that you're going to be sharing your slides with Omar for us to take a deeper look at. And I found the different types of technology discussed very interesting, especially the last one, digital twins, because I find this topic very special. I had my graduation research done on this particular topic and its impacts on the supply chains. So I really think there is a future when it comes to talking about digital twins. And I find it very impressive how we can have a whole different reality based on just a virtual environment. So that really sparks my interest.
Well, if you think about virtual reality, in essence, what we are creating in a true virtual reality environment is a digital twin.
Exactly. It's a replica of the physical environment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I do believe it can be applied in many contexts, but I do think it does come with a lot of implications and complications. I don't think it's that easy to be implemented unless if it's like a very advanced firm or something that has a lot of infrastructure to support it.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely correct. It takes a lot of data. It takes a lot of sophisticated modeling. And both of those have very large, what I was call dollar signs associated with them.
Yes. I think we can take some questions. If anyone wants to share any of the questions they have.
Let's see. Omar.
Hi, Professor.
Omar, yes.
My name is Omar Ahmed. I'm the Vice President of the ICA Egyptian Student Chapter. We're very pleased to have you today. We really appreciate it, and I'm really interested when it comes to technology when we speak about supply chains, especially about blockchain. I do have like research interested in that part, as well as I do have like a startup that's correlated with blockchain. So that's very interesting that we've spoken about that. So my question is, most of the issues that we've mentioned today, it being like global warming or geopolitical issues, I think these are kind of problems that are completely out of our reach. We, of course, as professionals need to untangle these issues, understand them, and of course need to improve our contingency planning. But how can we maneuver these kind of issues when it's completely out of our hands and out of our reach?
Well, we have to do risk assessments and build resiliency into our supply chain for those risks that we don't anticipate. But in dynamic modeling of supply chains and in what I call scenario risk games, you can look at what are the implications of what happens if this happens? What happens if this happens? What happens if a barrier is put up and I can no longer access this country? And determine the major impacts that will have on your supply chain. And you can then make intelligent decisions about, do I want to diversify my supply base? Do I want to be bringing that supply base home? Do I want to still leave my supply base the way it is, but really focus more attention on the political things that are going on around my operations? So yes, you're right. We have limited impact on the environment or the environmental disruptions that might arise or the geopolitical issues that might arise. But we can certainly plan and build scenarios around how am I going to respond to, first of all, minimize those interactions with my supply chain, and secondly, do what ifs that say, okay, if that does happen, here's what I do.
Splendid. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure having you on this session. We hope to have further collaborations, and we would also really like it if you could share the slides with Omar. Thanks again.
I will send them. I will send them to Omar as soon as we end today.
Thank you
I
so
also
much.
thank you, Dr. Rob.
All right. Well, listen, thank you. I know it's late there in Egypt, and but I appreciate all of you who came this evening to listen, and hope you got some value out of the discussion. And I'm always open for, send me an email or something if you have a question, because supply chain has been my life, and I'm getting close to the end, much closer than you guys are to your start. So I would like to at least impart some of my many years of knowledge to young people like yourselves, so you have at least an opportunity to go on your own path with a bit more information.
Thank you so much for your time.
All right. Well, listen, have a great evening. I'll get these slides to Omar right away, and then we'll continue this dialogue, I know.
Yes, hopefully.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Goodbye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.